Good afternoon. About 10 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi, the 3rd of January 2023. A very happy new year to you. And I trust that you had wonderful festivities. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and it is a pleasure to be back and to have you back on board as we continue discussing and advancing the African narrative. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, and I'm bringing you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching me from across the globe. We start our news bulletin this afternoon from Burkina Faso. And Burkina Faso has asked France to recall its ambassador, Luc Hollande, after several tense exchanges with the military junta that have strained relations between the two countries. Paris-based Pan-African publication Jeune Afrique reported on Monday, citing unnamed sources in Paris. Burkina Faso's Foreign Affairs Minister Olivier Rouamba reportedly wrote to the French presidency at the end of December demanding a change of representative. The development comes less than 2 weeks after Burkina Faso expelled UN resident coordinator Barbara Manze. In November, the French embassy in Ouagadougou accused Burkina Faso of failing to provide adequate protection to its premises, which were attacked during anti-French protests last year. In July, Ambassador Hollande was forced to apologize for comparing militant violence in Burkina Faso to a civil war. Burkina Faso is increasingly embracing Russia, seemingly under the influence of Mali, which cut diplomatic ties with France last year after Paris condemned Bamako's violence. The Reuters news agency quotes prosecutors as saying that the victims were killed by gunfire, but there was no indication on the possible perpetrators or motive for the attacks. The authorities have called for calm pending the outcome of the investigation. A rights group say the dead were civilians who had been targeted by a civil defense force recently launched by the government to help fight an Islamist insurgency. There has been no confirmation for this. The West Africa country is battling an Islamic insurgency and has already displaced nearly 2 million people and prompted 2 military coups within a year. And you're still staying with Burkina Faso, and the country has repeated its commitment to restoring the constitutional rule within 18 months following a decision by the U.S. to drop it from its preferential trade program. The American Trade Representative's Office said the country had failed to meet the requirements of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, because it had acted unconstitutionally. There were 2 military coups in Burkina Faso last year, sparked by the authorities' inability to control an intensifying Islamist insurgency. AGOA gives sub-Saharan African countries a duty-free access to the U.S. market as long as they meet certain eligibility requirements, including progress towards democracy. And then we go to Cameroon. The army, the military rather, says it deployed scores of troops to Oku, Kumbo and Kakiri districts on Monday in the Central African state's English-speaking northwest region. The military says armed gangs over the weekend sealed markets, chased people and vehicles from the streets, and abducted scores of civilians who did not comply with their orders. Biya said many, that is President Paul Biya of Cameroon, said many rebel groups have been crushed, but the threat from separatists has been significantly reduced. He praised the Central African States military for protecting civilians and property during the 6-year conflict and said peace would pave the way for region's reconstruction. The rebels say they want to carve out an English-speaking state they call Ambazonia from Cameroon and its French-speaking majority. Cameroon's military admits the troops have been in running battles with rebels in several western towns and villages, but says their forces did not suffer any casualties. The separatists deny their fighters are abducting and harassing civilians. Rebels on social media posted on Monday said that their fighters were enforcing the curfew to counter Biya's claim that fighters were being defeated. Separatists in English-speaking Western Cameroon launched their rebellion in 2017 after they said was the year of discrimination by the country's French-speaking majority. After they said it was years of discrimination, but you know the problem with the Anglophone and the rest of the Cameroon did not even just start in 2017. It just dates back to very many years back. Now, Biya says Cameroon is indivisible and anyone attempting to divide it will be crushed. The UN says the conflict has killed more than 3,500 people and displaced more than 750,000 so far. Nigerian former President Olusegun Obasanjo is at the center of a political storm after endorsing opposition presidential hopeful Peter Obi ahead of the general election due next month. In his endorsement, Mr. Obasanjo described Mr. Obi of Labour Party as a mentee who had an edge over other candidates. He also described the West African country's current state of affairs as having moved from the frying pan into the fire and from the mountaintop to the valley. Mr. Obasanjo ruled Nigeria between 1999 and 2007, but in an angry response, President Muhammadu Buhari's office said the former leader was being jealous and represented the dark days of Nigeria's democracy. The former president thinks he is the best ever to lead Nigeria and there will never be another one better than him, a statement from a presidential aide said. Peter Obi is seen as one of the three main contenders. The others are Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the ruling APC and Abubakar Atiku of the main opposition PDP. And Libyan authorities said on Sunday they had found 18 bodies buried in a mass grave in a former stronghold of the Islamic State group after conflict-stricken North Africa's nation's coast. The missing persons authorities said in a statement the bodies were unearthed in the Salba area of Sirte, a city in the central Libya. The bodies were taken to a hospital it ordered in the conflict. The European Union on Saturday urged Rwanda to stop supporting the M23 rebel group, which has captured areas in the North Kivu province of neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC, along with the United States and the several European countries, has repeatedly accused its smaller Central African neighbor of backing the M23, although Kigali, Rwanda's capital, has denied the charge. The Tutsi rebel group has in recent months advanced to within a few dozen kilometers of the province capital Goma. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said that the European bloc had urged Rwanda to stop supporting the M23 and use all means to press the M23 to comply with the decisions taken by the EAC and at a November summit in Angola. Borrell's comments came after UN's experts' report on the Democratic Republic of Congo indicated it had collected enough proof of direct intervention by Rwandan defense forces inside the DRC territory between at least November 2021 and last year in October. The experts' report says Rwandan troops launched operations to reinforce the M23 against the mainly Hutu Democratic Forces of the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, notably by supplying weapons, ammunition and uniform. Kigali sees FDLR as a threat that justifies interventions inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Economic Community of the West African States, ECOWAS, has given Mali until January 1st to release 46 Ivorian soldiers it claims were mercenaries. However, Birahima Ouattara, brother of the head of state, stressing that the matter was on the way to resolution. It appears that as relations between Mali and Cote d'Ivoire have improved significantly with the memorandum recently signed by the two governments, ECOWAS considers it is not the time to create new tensions. The agreement reached between Mali and Ivory Coast leaves open the possibility of a presidential pardon for the head of the Malian military junta, Assimi Goïta. Therefore, all eyes now are on Koulouba, the seat of the presidential palace in Bamako, and to speed up the process that could lead to a pardon, the defense lawyers have filed an act of non-appeal to certify that they renounce all means of appeal. According to Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara, the soldiers will soon return to the Ivorian soil. Ugandan military is investigating circumstances under which one of its officers deployed in Mogadishu in Somalia ran amok and shot 3 colleagues dead over an unidentified issue. The incident, according to the military sources, happened on Monday morning at the Mogadishu airport base, which is currently under the protection of the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia, UTMIS. Uganda remains the largest troop contributor. The Ugandan People's Defense Force, UPDF spokesperson Brigadier General Felix Kulayinje told the Monitor that identities of the deceased and the motive of the shooting has not yet been established. And then we go to South Africa. The death toll from an explosion of a tanker truck on Christmas Eve near eastern Johannesburg has risen to 34, including 10 health workers at a nearby hospital. Report the truck was carrying gas when it got stuck under a low-lying bridge in the town of Boksburg, sparking flames as firefighters tried to extinguish them. The tanker exploded, according to emergency services officials. A time bomb from the explosion substantially damaged Tambo Memorial Hospital, located about 100 meters away, authorities have confirmed. Public transport in the Tunisian capital ground to a halt after employees of the state transport company went on strike on Monday over delays to salary payment. Hundreds of workers staged a protest outside the Prime Minister's office. The industrial action highlights problems facing public companies as the government of President Kais Saied grapples with its worst financial crisis. The powerful UGTT union is to hold another two-day strike involving transport workers in late January. It says the action will be in protest against what it calls the government's marginalization of public companies. And then we conclude our news from Ethiopia. And Ethiopia's Tigray region, at war for the last 2 years, may finally be looking up to long-term peace after Eritrean forces, a key party to the war, began packing to leave the battlefield. The decision for Eritrea to leave Tigray was reached this week after a delegation of Ethiopian government officials for the first time toured Mekelle, the capital of the region, since the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement. Now, this idea on Thursday last week, where the troops had been seen crossing back into Eritrea through Shiraro, one of the towns of the Eritreans frequently shelled at the height of the war. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. A very good afternoon to you, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching us from. And in case you are getting a bit frustrated, just a bit of connection problems there, but we are working on it so that we can have a more stable connection. But thank you so much. So let's just look at some of these stories that I was just seeing them play out. I was away for a while, and so I couldn't wait to be back here to talk to you about some of these developing stories. But first off, before we get to this Burkina Faso story, because a lot seems to be happening in Burkina Faso, this conversation or this back and forth between a former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and now President Muhammadu Buhari. Of course, Obasanjo is at the center of a political storm after he endorsed an opposition presidential hopeful. Nigeria is going to its elections next month, I believe. I don't know the exact date, but yes, it is in February. And one of the contenders is Peter Obi. And so the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, came out and said, he's endorsing Obi of the Labour Party as a mentee. I guess he mentored him, and because he believes that he had an edge over other candidates. All right, and he also described the West African country's current state of affairs as having moved from the frying pan to the fire. So basically, it is worse from how it were maybe before President Muhammadu Buhari became president. So obviously, the current president, Muhammadu Buhari, was not very pleased with that. So his his office responded in a manner that is not very presidential. Might I add, they are both not being presidential, because I believe even the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, as much as you want to criticize the current leadership, you also had your own faults and shortcomings while you were president. In fact, if I had time, we could go through them, but I would not delve into that right now. So even as much as you do have a place as a statesman and as an elder now in that country, and the position that I think you even hold in this continent, we've seen you being appointed by African Union to lead several mediation processes. We saw you do that in Ethiopia, but of course you were not very successful until former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, was thrown in there, and somehow the process moved in quickly because he had been there for over a year and nothing had been achieved much until then. But I'll digress from that. So my point is, as much as we know, and I criticize President Muhammadu all the time, and for good reasons, because of how he is handling especially very important things, and we should talk about it. But for you to come now and criticize Buhari right now, and in the manner in which you went about it, I think it might not have been, as much as you're endorsing this candidate, but you should do it in a way, and you're criticizing the current government, you should do it in a way that it is from a statesman. Yeah, it is from a statesman, and I think that is the problem we have in our politics in Africa. As long as we don't agree and we are in opposing sides, so I'll just criticize you because why not? But if we could engage in criticism that is constructive, that is meant to bring solutions, sir. If I would have loved to hear that you approached President Muhammadu Buhari, because you're a former general, I believe, and you went to him and you talked to him about, hey, perhaps I could advise you on how to handle this runaway insecurity, for example, or this and that. You're an older statesman. You have a wealth of experience and wisdom that perhaps Nigeria could benefit from. So instead of just being callous in the manner in which you choose to, criticize, you actually are in a position that your voice could be added and could bring some change in Nigeria. So you still have a role to play, and I think your experience is still needed in Nigeria, okay? And it is interesting that you are walking around these countries trying to mediate and bring peace. And Nigeria needs that kind of mediation process. We see how things are going on in Nigeria. We see the insecurity. We see everything else that is going wrong. So you are required, sir. Your services are required in Nigeria. I don't know how Nigerians will feel about that. But his a criticism of now President Buhari, of course, was met with an angry response. Let me tell you something. So this is what the office of President Buhari said, that the former president is being jealous and he represents the dark days of Nigeria's democracy. Okay, and because Obasanjo had said, the former president had said, he thinks that, this is what Obasanjo said, Harry, if this is part of what your statement is saying in regards to response towards Obasanjo, seriously, it's very nonsensical. And to think of the things that Nigerians would want really to be addressed, and you would choose to pick on such pettiness. It is not everything warrants a response, President Buhari. I know right now you're just checking on your time because, you're almost out of office. You have like a month or so to go. And so there's nothing much you can do that you have not been able to do over these years, but still you are the president. So not everything warrants a response. And also the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, I know you've been very critical of President Muhammadu Buhari, but come on. I think if we can just engage in a more constructive way, I think we can have a better Africa. Now, this story of Eritrea withdrawing from that region in Ethiopia, in Tigray. It's apparently it has the army there. They've began packing to leave the battlefield, and the decision for Eritrea to leave Tigray was reached last week after a delegation of Ethiopian government officials for the first time toured Mekelle, the capital of the region, since the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement. And it bothers me that Eritrea participated in this conflict, and Eritrea was accused of committing these atrocities, of course, together with the government forces, together with the TPLF and other players. And Eritrea would just pack its things, the army, and just retreat back to their country. And without accountability, that bothers me. I think such behavior should not be allowed to, should not go unpunished. African Union must interrogate this. African Union must address this. Otherwise, we will be encouraging such behaviors, and other countries might take suit because no action was taken against Eritrea. And so this must not be encouraged. So they've packed their stuff and they're leaving the Tigray region, and they're heading back to their country. And so the decision, of course, that cessation of hostilities agreement that was signed in early November in South Africa, that mediation process that I was describing, former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and Kenya's president, Uhuru Kenyatta, under the auspices of the African Union, led the mediation process that brought out this outcome. And Eritrea was not part of the, signatories to that agreement, and but it had sided with the Ethiopian government. So that bothers me. So I'm just hoping that at some point there will be some level of accountability, even as we look at for accountability for other actors in this conflict. Eritrea should be held accountable together with the rest of the other players. Now, the European Union over the weekend, and this is a story I wanted to come back and talk to you about because I was just reading it and my head was spinning. So now the European Union urging Rwanda to stop supporting the M23 rebels, which has had urged Rwanda to stop supporting the M23 and use all means to press the M23 to comply. And here's the thing. The European Union, I think the aid they gave to Rwanda, the $21 million aid, maybe about a month ago, thereabout, it's not too long ago, that they gave Rwanda this aid for the peacekeeping mission that Rwandan forces is engaging in Cabo Delgado, northern part in Mozambique. But like I've said here before several times, France, Rwanda is protecting France's interest in Cabo Delgado because Total Oil, which operates key mining sites there of natural gas and oil and all that, is from France. And so because of the rebel extremist groups that were ongoing around that area, it was threatening the operations of Total Oil and Exxon from the US, but mainly Total Oil. And so they entered an agreement in the name of peacekeeping, and Rwandan forces are there in the name of peacekeeping, but they're helping in protecting the interests of France. So European Union offered Rwanda some money in support of that peacekeeping mission. Forget the fact that even as they were issuing this help, there had already been credible reports that in support of allegations that Rwanda is equipping and is arming and is supporting the M23 rebels. Even during that time, this conflict was ongoing, and Rwanda had been accused numerous times. And there had been substantial reports from United Nations independent investigators who had done their own investigations and presented this report to the United Nations Security Council. There had been some credible investigations and reports by the United States, who by then had accused Rwanda numerous times. And so I think 2 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, France came out to tell Rwanda to stop supporting the M23. And now the European Union has come. You see the way it is orchestrated, because they've been using Rwanda. They have been working with Rwanda. Rwanda has been the blue-eyed boy, which have been serving their interest. The UK is quiet on the other side, because right now they're working in cahoots, and Rwanda is accepting the migrants who are being forced to, the court ruled in the UK, the court ruled that, the UK could, bring the migrants from the UK to Rwanda, the ones who have access to UK in illegal ways, And so they have a working partnership. And that's why you hear Britain is very quiet on this matter. It has looked the other side because they're benefiting. And this European, Western powers, as long as they're benefiting and you're carrying out their dirty jobs sometimes, and you're acting in a manner that protects their own interests, they will not care what you're doing. So now, I don't know if they're done using or working with Rwanda. So now European Union is coming out and is asking Rwanda to stop supporting the M23. Why are you asking Rwanda to stop supporting the M23 while you are still supporting Rwanda? If indeed you have, reports that suggest or that can prove that Rwanda is supporting M23 rebels, why are you supporting Rwanda? And that is the level of hypocrisy that I've been having a problem with, coming from these Western powers. Well, they come here and lecture us about human rights abuses, lecture us about good governance, lecture us about all these things, But they turn around and support countries that have very bad records as far as this thing is concerned, as long as it is serving their interest. So European Union, you can't just point fingers at Rwanda. If indeed you have credible reports that Rwanda is supporting the M23 rebels, then you must cease supporting Rwanda. Sanctions must be meted on Rwanda, the same way you sanction every other country that falls short of some of these things that qualifies a country to be in your good graces. And Rwanda has fallen short now, or I don't know what is going on, but you can see how now the systematic condemnation of Rwanda, which is warranted, but it is the timing of it that really you wonder what is really going on. What is really going on? And while they are condemning the M23 and the allegations that Rwanda is supporting this group, they are not condemning in equal measures the credible reports that have pointed fingers over the government of Democratic Republic of Congo's support of the Hutus Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR. This is a rebel group, and the name itself, the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. And this group is located in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it is for this reason that Rwanda is accused of supporting the M23, which is mainly Tutsis, to come and fight this group that is mainly Hutus, that is being supported now, allegedly, by the Democratic Republic of Congo's government. So if we are going to condemn what Rwanda is alleged to be doing, why can't we also condemn this other side, the government, which is also being accused of working with a rebel group that is causing equal measures of human suffering and atrocities in equal measures as M23 rebels? Why are we picking and choosing? A government should not be working in cahoots with a rebel group. So you have credible reports that Rwanda allegedly is supporting the M23. And you also have credible reports about DRC's government supporting the FDLR. But why are you not condemning Tshisekedi about this? Why are you not trying to bring DRC into account? If you are honest And if you are serious about wanting to stop this war, which I highly doubt because of how you all have been, handling this matter, then there will be an equal condemnation of all these rebel groups that are operating in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo that have ensured that there's not peace in that area. But I term this as non-consequential. Accusing Rwanda is not enough. Go further. You have proof, then you have to meet the penalty of that proof. It has to merge. It has to merge. It has to merge. And all right, so let's look at another story. This Burkina Faso story here that has been developing. I'll not look at the Mali and the ECOWAS story because of the time that we don't have. But I want us to go through this, the stories from Burkina Faso, developing stories from Burkina Faso. So now there has been some report that Burkina Faso has asked France to recall its ambassador. Luc Holland, after several tense exchanges with the military junta that have strained relations between the two countries. And this has been reported in a Pan-African publication, Jeune Afrique. They reported that on Monday. Burkina Faso's Foreign Affairs Minister Olivier Ruamba reportedly wrote to the French presidency at the end of December, demanding a change of representative. Now, the development comes less than 2 weeks after Burkina Faso expelled UN resident coordinator Barbara Manze. In November, the French embassy in Ouagadougou accused Burkina Faso of failing to provide adequate protection to its premises. Now, you have to understand under under diplomacy. I think that document was signed in Vienna in 1964. So a country, a host country, or a receiving country, as they are referred to in the diplomatic world, a receiving country has a responsibility to protect the properties and the premises, official premises, of another country in their land. Okay? So the Republic of Kenya has a responsibility, the government of Kenya has a responsibility to protect all the foreign missions in this country, all the embassies, everything. And that's why you'll see all these, when you go to these embassies, you'll see the Kenyan soldiers or the Kenyan, army or soldiers are the ones who are at the gate. They're the ones who are frisking. They're the ones, because Kenya has a responsibility to ensure every mission that is present in its land is protected, and vice versa across the world. That is what diplomacy requires. And so in November, the French embassy in Ouagadougou accused Burkina Faso of failing to provide adequate protection of its premises, which were attacked during anti-French protests last year. So Burkina Faso, failed to do that. We saw the protest and we saw the property and the premise of the French embassy being attacked. I think we saw how all that happened. So Burkina Faso failed in that regard. It has a responsibility. It does have a responsibility to protect, whether they're in good working relations with France or not, but Burkina Faso still has a responsibility to protect the premises of France inside of Burkina Faso. And also there's something else that could happen. Another third country could also protect under if say France required, all right? Another third country could actually protect the interest of the premises of Burkina Faso, of France's embassy inside Burkina Faso, but as long as France was okay with it, all right? There's also that clause that allows for that. So France, is complaining about this. Burkina Faso failed to protect its premises during that time, and President Hollande was forced to apologize for comparing militant violence in Burkina Faso to a civil war. We know that since the the accusations, or rather Burkina Faso deciding to embrace the Russian mercenaries to come and help in fighting of the jihadist group there in Burkina Faso. The relationship between Burkina Faso and its former colony has since deteriorated, and Burkina Faso seems to be following on the footsteps of Mali. We've seen how that has happened, and it appears it's just dancing, it's just following very closely to what Mali has been doing. Okay, and so it's not working out so well. So now another report that was shocking. About 28 bodies were discovered still in Burkina Faso, were discovered, and they're said to be civilians who had been targeted by civil defense force recently. A mass grave was discovered where 28 people bodies were found in the northwestern town of Nuuna in Burkina Faso. So apparently, according to a rights group, as I was saying there earlier, these dead people were civilians, and the government had recently launched a fight against Islamist insurgency, and so it is not clear who murdered these people. So this rights group is saying it could be the government, it could be the government forces, but it's still not very clear. And of course, the West African country is battling an Islamist insurgency that has already displaced about 2 million people. And still staying with Burkina Faso, now the US has dropped Burkina Faso from Africa Free Trade, deal. And when I was talking to you about how the Western world has been handling the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, this story, it's quite similar in a way that how they choose and pick what and where and when and how to respond to different situations. I'll tell you what, we know AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, that provides duty-free treatment to goods of designated sub-Saharan African countries. The program dates back to 2000 and has the goal of promoting economic growth through good governance and free markets. It covers non-textile as well as textile goods, and was most recently authorized through September 30th, 2025, and about 5,240 tariff items are eligible for AGOA benefits. And in order to benefit from AGOA, there are set conditions that has to be met. So Sub-Saharan Africa has really been benefiting for this, and AGOA, of course, was set under the public law in the US, 106/2000, and that happened on May 18, 2000. Okay, sorry. So now Burkina Faso, having been removed from this trade agreement because of what the US says is they have failed to meet. All right, they have failed to meet certain criteria that qualifies them to be part of AGOA. Now, the American Trade Representative Office said the country had failed to meet the requirements of the African Growth and Opportunity Act because it has acted unconstitutionally. I think because of the two coups that took place in Burkina Faso. Now, so I had to look through some of the requirements of this AGOA and how it was set out. And of course, the accession of the countries in Sub-Saharan Africa to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Convention of Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in International Business Transactions. That is just some of the articles in this. Now, eligibility requirements, this is what I want us to look at. And we'll start with Section 104.8. The President, any president who is in power in the US, is authorized to designate a sub-Saharan African country as an eligible sub-Saharan African country if the president determines that the country, one, has established or is making continual progress toward establishing a market-based economy that protects private property rights, incorporates an open rules-based trading system, and minimizes government interference in the economy through measures such as price control, subsidies, and government ownership of economic assets. So that is just one of the conditions that a country should meet for it to be eligible member of AGOA. And the second, B, the rule of law, political pluralism, and the right to due process a fair trial, and equal protection under the law. So this is what I want us to look at, because I think this is one of the technical points that maybe made the U.S. Remove or reconsider, Burkina Faso's membership or as part of the AGOA family. Now, if this be true, that Burkina Faso has failed to meet one of these key criteria, okay, because it has, the country has acted unconstitutionally, because last year 2 coups happened. One, and the person that, had the first coup was removed, and now we have Captain Ibrahim Traoré there as the transitional president in Burkina Faso. But we've seen also coups happen in other countries across the continent. But I want us to just dwell on this point for the next perhaps 2 minutes, as one of the eligibility requirements of member states in AGOA: the rule of law, political pluralism, and the right to due process, a fair trial, and equal protection under the law. Now, point me where, for instance, Rwanda will qualify under that. Rwanda does not allow a pluralism. Elections happen in Rwanda. President Kagame gets over 90% of votes. And because we see how opposition and any voice of dissent is met with a kind of force that nobody dares. Nobody dares. You can't even do a cartoon caricature, criticizing or making fun of the government or just trying to make a point. You can't do that. You will be jailed. All right? So when you look at a fair trial, Rwanda does not meet that. All right? Uganda does not meet that. How many times has Besigye, has Bobi Wine, and other people with dissenting voices have found themselves in the courts, in jail, without a fair trial? Okay? Equal protection. Where? Show me. So if you are removing Burkina Faso from this trade, the Africa Free Trade Deal, otherwise known as AGOA, under these conditions, then so many other African countries do not qualify. What is Equatorial Guinea doing in that list? What is Cameroon, Paul Biya's government, doing in AGOA? Why? And yet we will not have Zimbabwe in there. We'll not have, some other countries in there. Right? So the others which you keep admitting and removing and all that, the list is long. On September 15, 2016, the Central African Republic regained AGOA eligibility back, but it had been removed. And in December 22nd, 2020, the Democratic Republic of Congo was reinstated as an AGOA beneficiary, and it had been removed earlier. On December 2021, Ethiopia, Guinea, and Mali had their AGOA beneficiary status revoked, effective the 1st of January 2022. And because the Ethiopians, because of the conflict that had lasted there for 2 years, Guinea and Mali is also because of the military coups. But outside of that, there are countries that do not meet this eligibility. If these are the standards, and here's the money in which they pick and choose how to and where to place some of these sanctions, or how to decide on the eligibility. I don't think it cuts across, and I don't think it is standard. So if you were to go by these criteria and these requirements that you've set out by yourself, United States, then some of these countries are not supposed to be there at all, because they're not compliant. They're not compliant. So I think even this AGOA is just something that is used as a tool of control. Obviously, it's part of the United States foreign policy, strategy in how to engage with Africa and how to continue running its agenda and interest in this continent. And of course, this was made very obvious by the recent meeting that happened between the 13th and 15th of December last year in the U.S. And the U.S. had this Africa Leaders U.S. Summit because the U.S. is really worried about its position of influence here in the continent that is now being overtaken by those of China and Russia and and India and other powers. So the U.S. is really trying to find its way back as being the main, influence in this continent. So something like AGOA is just one of those tools that is part of their foreign policy that is being used to advance the US's interest and its way of just wielding the stick. If you don't dance to our tunes, then we're going to punish you. Otherwise, there are countries that shouldn't be in this AGOA. So if you are removing Burkina Faso because of these other things that it has fallen short, many other African countries outside of the coup, but many other African countries do not meet the standards, but you will keep them. Equatorial Guinea fails miserably, but you will have President Nguema country being part of AGOA. It baffles me. You will have Cameroon under Paul Biya. You're talking about countries which uphold pluralism. President Paul Biya has been in power for 43 years. He just received last month, is it, another 7 years in power. No, that is President of Equatorial Guinea, but even President Paul Biya has been in power for over 40 years now. Okay? But you still want to talk to us about democracy and good governance, and countries have to meet this criteria to be part of AGOA, and yet to have the most notorious leaders in that country, in that group, that don't even meet, would not even, if you were to go by your own standards, would not even, qualify to be part of that. So it is this double speak and hypocrisy from countries like the US and France and the UK, and now the European Union to some large extent, that sometimes you wonder, Africa, if we don't set our own agenda and do our things in the manner that serves this continent, we will be we'll be at the dinner table, but unfortunately we'll be the dinner. Okay, we will not be people will just be enjoying our spoils. And that is what they have been doing. So I think we have to wake up. We must wake up and try to charter our own ways. We do things that are for the interest of this continent, and that should start by the reforms in the African Union, which I think that is a conversation we shall have some other time. Thank you so much for your time. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogutu. You the rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.